حادث. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue in our lesson in the commentary of the Aqaid of Al-Imam Al-Nasafi. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our lesson and bless us with the understanding, and may Allah bless our hearts with iman and taqwa, and protect us from all difficulties, trials and tribulations in dunya and akhirah. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. So inshallah, we will enter into our book. So in our last lesson, we have come into the topic where Al-Imam An-Nasafi speaks about the contingency of the universe, and he mentioned that the universe, everything that is within the contents of the universe is contingent. So as what we see in our book, and he said bijami'i ajza'ihi, and al-alam, we spoke about the meaning of al-alam. Al-alam is anything that is beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the meaning of the definition of al-alam. So he said al-alamu bijami'i ajza'ihi, with all of his parts, min as-samawati wa ma fiha wal ardi wa ma alayha, whether we are speaking about the skies or the earth. So basically the universe as a whole, muhdathun, this is the khabar. Muhdath, basically it means is contingent, and contingent, al-Imam at-Taftazani, and he mentioned after that, he said ay mukhrajun min al-adami ila al-wujud. So this is a very important definition that I repeat many times in my classes, and I hope those who are following this class and have done some revision, especially what we have covered from the Aqaid Nasafiyyah in our last class. So it will be useful for those who are following to have a bit read up on Aqidah Nasafiyyah on this concept of the contingency of the universe. So basically, when we say something that is muhdath, something that is hadith or muhdath, it basically same meaning. So it is something that is brought into existence from non-existence. This is the meaning. And he said mukhrajun min al-adami ila al-wujud. So basically, he's saying the universe, all of the universe and all of its contents, it is what you call it, contingent. So we have covered basically this paragraph that we see on the screen. So basically he explained about what is the meaning of contingency, and what is the difference between the Muslims and the philosophers with regard to the contingency of the universe, because some philosophers believe that the universe is not contingent, and they believe in qidamun naw, they believe that the universe, what you call it, is pre-eternal, with the pre-eternity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are some of the things that we have covered in our last lesson. So then he mentioned about the evidence behind the contingency of the universe. So after he mentioned that the universe is contingent, muhdath, so he says summa ashara ila dalili huduth al-alam. Al-Imam Taftazani mentioned, Al-Imam Nasafi speaks about the evidence behind the contingency of the universe. What is the evidence? And he said that either huwa al-alam a'yanun wa'arad. He mentioned that the universe consists of a'yan wa'arad, and also I mentioned this also last week. We mentioned that every content of this universe is divided into two parts, and we have the substance, and we have the accident. And I mentioned there is some fault in the translation. Later on, we go back into the other translation, and we find it better explain about this. So basically, you see the word a'yan wa a'rad. So this is where basically we stop in our last lesson. when we say a'yan, and it is a substance. A'yan is a substance. A'rad, and it is the accident. And I gave any the example of a cup. And if you remember last week, I gave any the example any of a cup, and I mentioned any that the cup any is a substance, and the color of the cup any is an accident. So the color is something that does not stand on its own. Colors, whether it is red or white or black, it is something that does not stand on its own. So when we say something that does not stand any on its own, and we use any the term an accident, we use any the term an accident. Whereas any for substance, it is something any that stand any on its own. What is any meaning of stand on its own? So this lesson, inshallah ta'ala, we will explain any in greater detail. We will find Imam Taftazani will mention any further the difference any between a substance and an accident. So this is going to be today's any lesson. We are going to find out any about those any differences. So to understand what is a substance, and is easy. Yeah, when we say any something and it is substance, we can see many examples any around us, and even for ourselves, and we are a substance, correct or not? We are a substance, and our skin color is an accident. So our skin color is subsists within our bodies, and that is a substance. So the skin color does not stand any on its own. So it always subsists within the substance. So now when we go on, and inshallah, all this and we have covered also, and you see this paragraph, you can refer any to the recording, and all this and I've mentioned. So today's lesson, and we will start from here, inshallah. Let me see, yeah. Okay, so this is, I believe this is where we stop. Okay. So now you see how Al-Imam Taftazani now he is going to explain. Al-Imam Taftazani, he is going to explain further what is the meaning of a'yan, and what is the meaning of a'rad. So a'yan is the plural of ain, whereas a'rad is the plural of a'rad. So he said فالأعيان أي ممكن يكون له قيام بذاته. قيام بذاته. So when we say something and it is substance, it stands on its own. So قيام بذاته. What is the meaning of it stand by its own? Meaning it is not in need of another entity to subsist in. It is not in need of another entity to subsist in. So this is an example of a'yan. This is an example of a substance. So we say this is a substance, and it stands on its own. It stands on its own. Meaning it is not in need of another substance for it to subsist. So meaning you cannot put something in its place. So this is a substance that take up this space. So you cannot put something else in it. You cannot put something else in its place, because it stand on its own. So this is basically what he mentioned. Later on he will give example, no issue. What you call it? If you still have some difficulties in understanding, inshallah, after this everything will be clear. So he said lahu qiyamun bi dhatihi biqarinatin ja'alahu min aqsamil alam. So this is what you call it. When we speak about substance, it is from the what you call it, categories or parts of this universe. So we mentioned this universe is divided into a'yan wa a'rad. And then he mentioned further. He said wa ma'na qiyamihi bidatihi 'inda al-mutakallimin. So now he said that the meaning of qiyamihi bidatihi, that is standing on its own, 'inda al-mutakallimin. Mutakallimin and scholars of kalam. It means an yatahayyaza bi nafsihi. An yatahayyaza bi nafsihi ghayra tabi'in tahayyuzuhu li tahayyuzi shay'in akhar. So now we say this is a substance. This is an example of ain. Something that is ain, a substance. So he gave an example. He said an yatahayyaza bi nafsihi. Yatahayyaz, it takes up space by itself. So this substance it take this space. That's what I mentioned earlier. Same thing. this any substance any take any this space. It takes up any the space. غير تابع تحيزه لتحيز شيء آخر. يعني it does not any subsist in other يعني substances. It does not any subsist any in other substances. Type. What is any the meaning? The meaning any is like this. Now we say this is any a substance. The color of this bottle, the color of the bottle. Now the bottle, and we see this is a blue color, correct or not? This is an accident. That's what we mentioned. An accident cannot stand on its own. An accident, it does not yani take up space. It does not take up space. But the space any that is taken up, and is the space any of the substance. And the accident subsists any within the substance. So we say that accident cannot stand yani on its own. The moment yani, if yani for example we were to imagine that we remove any this accident or this color from yani this substance, then it will be in non-existence, because in reality it cannot any be in existence except that there must be a substance any for it any to be in existence that is subsists any in that substance. So here basically the author any is saying this is any a substance any for example, and it stand any on its own, and it is taking up any the space. It is taken up any the what you call it any the space, and it is not any in need any to subsist any on something else, on or another yani substance. So this is basically what any he meant. So here we have any the concept any of a substance yani is something any that take up space. A substance. Here we are speaking any about contingent beings any, of course. We are not speaking any about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are speaking any about العالم. So the topic here we have to bear in mind any the author any speaking any about العالم, and العالم any is anything that is other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it takes up space, and this is any the characteristics any of al-ain, the characteristics any of a substance. بخلاف العرض, then he mentioned يعني different any from accident. Al-arad any is accident. So example any we gave any the color. So he said فإن تحيزه تابع لتحيز الجوهر الذي هو موضوعه. So again any we go back any to this example. So when he speaks any about the accident al-arad, he said that the accident yani the example any for example of this color, the color it follows any the substance. It follows any the substance. So it is a substance any that take up space, not any the color. The color subsists any within any the substance. So color cannot exist without an entity. The color cannot exist without entity. As what I mentioned any many times, any there is no such thing any as color blue. So when we say something is blue, we are always any speaking any about a substance. So this is any a blue bottle, a blue yani bottle, yani it subsists any within any this bottle. So we say it is blue bottle, but there is no such thing any as blue any by itself. It is always subsisting any in substances. This is what we meant, and it doesn't stand any on its own. It is in need any of the substance any to subsist. It is in need any of the substance any to subsist. So this is what the author is saying. فَإِنَّ تَحَيُّزَهُ تَابِعٌ لِتَحَيُّزِ الْجَوْهَرِ. Jawhar any is part any of a substance, any the smaller part any of the substance. So when we speak about accident yani is always subsisting yani in a substance. الَّذِي هُوَ مَوْضُوعُهُ, yani the place anywhere it subsists. The place anywhere it subsists. So I hope any it is clear inshallah. أي مَحَلُّهُ الَّذِي يُقَوِّمُهُ. So this is any the mahal. We say this is any the mahal. The mahal any is a substance. So the color yani subsists any within any this any substance. Now, so accident, there is the difference any between accident and substance is that substance any standing on its own, yani it takes up any space, whereas accident it is in need any of the substance any to subsist. It's in need of the substance. So it does not any stand any on its own. So this is basically what it meant any when we say it doesn't stand any on its own, because on its own and it cannot be in existence. So it is always any subsisting any in the substances. وَمَعْنَى وُجُودِ الْعَرَض فِي الْمَوْضُوعِ. Then he further explained, he said the meaning of the existence of an accident in an entity. هو أن وجوده في نفسه هو وجوده في الموضوع. That its existence is existence in its entity. The moment you remove it, it becomes a non-existence, which in reality you cannot remove. But just to imagine, it becomes any non-existence. It cannot any exist. Accident cannot exist by itself. Accident cannot exist any by by itself. Likewise, when we say a length and width, length and width, there's such thing as length and width. It doesn't understand. It doesn't exist any by its own, but it is always subsisting in substances. So when we say this bottle is 15 meters long. This bottle is 15 meters long and 15 centimeters any long, 5 centimeters any wide. So here we have the length and width, and it goes back to the substance. But length and width by itself, it is non-existence. It is non-existence. Likewise, when it comes to color, as what we mentioned, by itself, it cannot exist. So here, the author is saying that it is innate of the mawdu'. It is innate of the place where it subsists. Otherwise, it cannot be in existence. وَلِهَذَا يَمْتَنِعُ الْإِنْتِقَالُ عَنْهُ. So there can be no transfer of accident. So for example, if you want to remove the color blue from this bottle, it is impossible. You cannot remove, because it subsists in the substance. It cannot be separated from the substance. The color blue cannot be separated by the substance. ولهذا يمتنع الانتقال عنه بخلاف وجود الجسم في الحيز. So he said, different from the substance that exists in a particular space. لأن وجوده في نفسه أمر ووجوده في الحيز أمر آخر. So now number one, we say, when it comes to substances, we say substances it stand by its own. It stand by its own. Tamam. So we say this is the first thing. Number two, we say it takes up any space. It takes up any space. Whereas for accident, it doesn't stand on its own, and it is in need of the substance to subsist. Then he mentioned وَلِهَذَا يُنْتَقَلُ عَنْهُ. So it can move from one place to another place. So for example, this bottle now it is here. I can move this bottle to another place. I can move this bottle to another place. So now it is taking up this particular space, and then I move the bottle to another. I move the bottle to another place. So this is the characteristics of the substance. So different from the accident. So basically, Al-Imam Taftazani is just trying to explain the difference between substance and accident. So this is some of the examples that substance take up space, substance can transfer from one place to another place, but accident cannot. Can you transfer the accident? No, you cannot transfer. You cannot move the color blue from here to here. But when it comes into the substance, yes, you can. And then he mentioned about philosophers. So it is not really important. The thing about philosophers. Philosophers has a different kind of understanding. They put into consideration even something that cannot be in existence, but as long as you can imagine, it is accepted. This is basically what the philosophers is saying. It is not really important. The author speaks about the difference between the Muslims the scholars of Aqidah and the philosophers. So basically, the scholars of Aqidah, the scholars of Kalam, they mention this difference between substance and accident. But he said, وَعِنْدَ الْفَلَاسِفَةِ مَعْنَى قِيَامِ الشَّيْءِ بِذَاتِهِ اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنْ مَحَلٍ يُقَوِّمُهُ. اسْتِغْنَاؤُهُ عَنْ مَحَلٍ يُقَوِّمُهُ. The philosophers have this definition, they say that when we say something that exists by its own, exists any by its own, it means it is not any in need any of an entity to subsist in. It is not any in need any of an entity to subsist. So this is the understanding of the philosophers, which is different of course. And then he mentioned wa ma'na qiyamihi bi shay'in ikhtisasuhu bihi. So as long as you ascribe something to something else, they what you call it, it is something that can be in existence, and even though it does not exist in the physical world, but as long as you can imagine its existence, it carries the same ruling as any substances, even though it is a form of accident. So basically what he's saying that the philosophers when they do not differentiate between substance and accident, despite that accident doesn't stand on its own, but they mention that you can imagine its existence even without subsisting in substances, then it is accepted. So this is the viewpoint of the philosophers, but of course to us this is something that is impossible, because they say that as long as you ascribe the characteristic of the accident, it means that it can be in existence. So these are some of the arguments Al-Imam Taftazani what you call it is saying the differences between the philosophers and the scholars of Kalam. As what I mentioned, this is not really what you call it important, but the philosophers mention something that is different than the Muslims, and of course this is something that is impossible, because not everything that we can imagine can exist. Not everything that we can imagine can exist. So let me give you a simple example, like when we say, for example, fatherhood. Does any fatherhood in existence as a substance? So we say it is not. It is just an ascription. It is just a description. Correct or not? When you have any father and son, and then you use the term fatherhood. You use the term fatherhood. So fatherhood by itself is not in existence. It is just an ascription, and we ascribe fatherhood to the father, since this person has a son or a daughter. So we say that he has entered into the age of fatherhood. So it is not any substance that exists by itself, but it is something that can be understood. It is something that can be understood. But the philosophers they say that as long as you can ascribe it, there is no difference between this ascription and what you call it, the existence of something which is like a substance in the physical world. So he said they are saying basically, even though it is based on imagination, not based on reality, but it is still something that is in existence like substances in existence. So this is what he mentions, sawa'un kana mutahayyizan kama fi sawadil jismi am la. So whether an accident, like he used he used the example of the color black. The color black that is subsisting in a substance, whether it is something that subsists within a substance, or it does not subsist. So the philosophers basically saying, as long as you can ascribe it to something else, then it carries the ruling of substances. It carries the ruling of substances. So anyway, what you call it, the philosophers basically saying something contradictory. At the end of the day, we say what our scholars mention is based on profound knowledge. So we gave the example of color, that color doesn't stand on its own. It is something that is logical. Correct or not? Something that is logical. How can we say an accident can exist by itself? How can we say an accident can exist by itself? It is impossible. But if you imagine it, what you can imagine, but it cannot exist in the physical world. It cannot exist in the physical world. You can imagine, for example, the color is separated from this book. The color red is separated from this book. But in reality, color always subsists in substances. So it doesn't mean that you can imagine. It doesn't mean that you can imagine that an accident can exist by its own, meaning that it can be in the physical world. So it doesn't mean that any of your imagination and it can be any in the physical world. So this is any the point of difference any between the scholars any of kalam and the philosophers. So the philosophers any they do not take any into consideration whether it is a reality in the physical world or based any on imagination. So they do not give that differentiation. But our scholars any they gave that differentiation. So here any we are speaking any about al-alam. Again, we are speaking any about the universe. We are speaking any about the realities, the things that are in existence. So that is why the author any mentioned any they are divided any into substances and accident. And there are differences any between substances and accident. And as what any we mentioned, some substance stand on its own, accident doesn't stand on its own. Accidents any are subsisting any in substances, and so on and so forth. So this basically Al-Imam Taftazani any is explaining any further the meaning any of substance any and accidents. So we can take a look any at the what you call it translation. So let us any go to the translation of the new book any that I mentioned. I think last week I mentioned this, correct, not? Any the new book any by Earl Edgar. Just to see yani his translation yani on what any we have covered. So now any we take a look here. So he said a substance any is that which as any possible thing has self-subsistence. Qiyam bidhatihi. Just now any I use any the word yani stand any on its own. Yani have self any subsistence. Context any this is referred any from their being any a part of the world. The meaning of self-subsistence any is the mutakallimin is that substance is bounded by itself. Substance any is he translated as substance any that is bounded any by itself, meaning you cannot put any something else any to replace. This is something any that stand on its own. So I cannot put another bottle any to place this inside or to subsist any in this bottle, because now that bottle any this bottle any take up any space. Is being bounded does not follow from the fact that other thing is bounded. In contrast any to the accident, different any from the accident, in which case is being bounded follows the fact that the atom any jawhar any is bounded. Here any about any the term any jawhar. Okay, this is a substance. That's what we mentioned. A substance any is made any of atoms. So atoms any is jawhar. So we study in science that we see this bottle, but it is made up any of atoms and molecules. Correct, no? This bottle any is made up of atoms and molecules. Our scholars any goes any to speak any about even the atoms. Speak any about any the atoms. So the atom carries any the same ruling any as the substance. The atom yani carries any the same ruling as a substance. What is the difference between an atom and a substance? So an atom yani is the part yani of the substance. So the substance any comprises any of atoms and molecules. Then he mentioned for the atom is a subject al-mawdu, or the locus, which gives subsistence to the accident. So look at how when he explained in English. He said the atom is a subject, mawdu, or the locus. What is the meaning of locus? This is locus, substance. So this is any the locus, the entity. So the accident subsists, just like we mentioned the color blue. The accident yani subsists yani in this substance. So this is what he said, which gives any subsistence any to the accident. The meaning of the existence any of the accident in the subject is that its very existence is the existence any in the subject. So meaning you cannot remove the accident any from the substance. What happens when you remove? It becomes non-existent. It becomes non-existent. So it is in need any of the substance. Accident any is in need any of the substance. For that reason, it cannot be transferred from the subject. Yani you cannot remove it. This is in contrast to the existence of a body within a boundary. A boundary and that take up space. For its very existence and its existence in a boundary are two different things. So we say this is a substance that stands on its own, and it takes up any space, and meaning you cannot put something else in its place. You cannot put something else in its place. So number one, we say that it does not in need any of another entity to subsist, And point number 2, yani it takes up any the space. It takes up any the space where no other entity any can take any its place. So these are two different things. That's what he mentioned. Then he speaks about what you call it, the philosophers, which is yani different. And that's what I mentioned, yani do not worry any much about what any philosophers are saying. They have some contradicting views pertaining to this. So now when we continue, inshallah, you can read yani what he mentioned. I gave the PDF inside the group, okay? So now when we go on, now we go back to Al-Imam An-Nasafi. So now we have in bracket وَهُوَ أي ما له قيام بذاته من العالم. So now Al-Imam An-Nasafi is going to speak about Al-A'yan. Al-A'yan. So he said that when comes to substances, ما له قيام بذاته من العالم, yani that subsist on their own, إما مركب, they are either murakkab yani meaning compound, min juz'aini fasa'idan indana. So when comes to substance, and he says substance are divided into two parts. You have murakkab yani a compound and non-compound. What is the meaning? So if you look at this bottle, this is a compound substance. It is made up of many parts. So it is made up of atoms and molecules, correct or not? It is made up of atoms and molecules. So when something that is made up of something else, some other substances, smaller substances, it is called jism. So this is what he say, wa huwa al-jismu. So al-jism it is compounded substance. Compounded substance that are made up of parts, just like our bodies. For example, we are also a substance. We are al-a'yan. We are considered to be ayn, correct or not? We are considered to be a substance, and we are a compounded substance. And why compounded? Because we are made up of parts and molecules. Whereas if it is not compounded, it's called jawhar. So there is a difference between jism and jawhar. Jism and jawhar. So jism is a substance that is compounded substance, whereas jawhar is a non-compounded substance. But both is under the category of substances, al-a'yan. So if you can imagine, we have substances, yani al-a'yan, and then below it compounded, non-compounded. So compounded is jism, non-compounded is jawhar. So this is the difference between jawhar and jism, and a'yan, the plural of ayn. So al-a'yan is the general term, and below it we have the jism and jawhar. So in books of aqidah, when our scholar speaks about jawhar, when our scholar speaks about jism, what you call it, then we know the difference between the two. So here Al-Imam An-Nasafi speaks about these differences, and Al-Imam Tatazani, as usual, will explain further. So he said that what is accepted by the scholars of Kalam, when we say jism, it is enough, we say min juz'aini fasa'idan, even two parts. For example, you have two jawhar or two molecules, for example, and it is combined, it becomes compounded, just by two substances, two jawhar, for example, it is still considered to be jism. So this is the minimum, he said min juz'aini fasa'idan, so 2 and above. So it can be 1 million parts, and it can be 100,000 parts, or it can be 2 parts. So the minimum it must be more than 1. But if it is 1, it's jawhar. But if it's more than 1, then it is jism. So he mentioned wa indal ba'di, and then he mentioned some differences amongst the scholars of Kalam pertaining to the what you call it, definition of jism. Is it 2 and above or more than 2? So he gave some opinions. So he said wa indal ba'di, and some of the scholars They mention la budda min salasati ajza. 3. 2 yani not enough. There must be 3. لتحقق تقاطع الأبعاد الثلاثة. So because of the 3 dimensions. Why 3? Because in every body there must be length, width and depth. These are the 3 dimensions. تقاطع الأبعاد الثلاثة. So minimum must be 3. It must have any a length, it must have any width, and there must be a depth. Then we say it is jism, a body. So you say أعني الطول والعرض والعمق. So the length, the width and the depth. وعند البعض من 8 أجزاء. Some scholars mention there must be 8 parts in order for us to say it is a jism. Why? ليتحقق تقاطع الأبعاد على الزوايا قائمة. So they mention why 8, because when we have the length, and you have the length, you have the width, you have the depth, then it must have the foundations. So when you have the foundations, so it becomes 8 yani in number. It becomes 8 yani in number. So imagine, for example, you have a substance, you have the length, you have the breadth, and you have the depth. We have the what you call it, the length, the breadth and the depth. So now imagine like if you look like a cube, the length, the width and the depth. Whether we are looking at a squarish cube or a rectangular cube, then what we get from it is what you call it, the 8 sides. So they mention there must be 8. وَلَيْسَ هَذَا نِزَاعًا لَفْظِيًّا رَاجِعًا إِلَى الْإِسْتِلَاءِ, and say this is not a differences based on the terminology within the knowledge of Aqidah, but in reality this is a difference in the language. And when you say jism in the Arabic language, what does it mean? Does it mean that it can be compounded by only 2 parts, or it must be 3 and more, or it must be 8, and so on and so forth? So these are some of the differences based on the language. So you say حتى يدفع بأن لكل أحد أن يصطلح على ما شاء بل هو نزاع في أن المعنى الذي وضع لفظ الجسم بإزائه هل يكفي فيه تركيب من جزئين أم لا. Why there are differences? Basically he's saying that when you say something that is jism, does combining of 2 parts make a body? This is the question. Or a body must consist of a length, breadth and depth, or a body must consist of all the 8 sides in order for us to call it a body. So because of these differences on how people understand a body in the language, that is why there are differences amongst the scholars. But again, this is not important. What is important a jism, when we say a body, it is basically something, a substance that comprises of different jawhar, different parts to it. So this is basically substances that are compounded. This is the first part basically he's saying. And then after that he mentioned the explanations of those differences, and this is not really important. And then Imam Nasafi mentioned غَيْرُ مُرَكَّبْ كَالْجَوْهَرِ. So this is the second part. This is from the matan of Aqaid Nasafiyyah. So the second part is what you call it, if the substance is not compounded. So substance, non-compounded substances is what is meant by jawhar. So basically there are 2 things. Number one is jism. Number 2 is jawhar. So jism is something that consists of different parts of 2 and more, and this is the opinion that is chosen by the mutakallimin. Most of scholars of kalam mention 2 is enough for us to consider that it is a jism, that it is a body. But if it is one, it is jawhar. So before that he mentioned some other things. What is the evidence of the first opinion? So he say احتج الأولون بأنه يقال لأحد الجسمين إذا زيد عليه جزء واحد أنه جسم من الآخر فلولا أن مجرد تركيب كاف في الجسمية لما صار بمجرد زيادة الجزء أزيد في الجسمية، وفيه نظرا لأن أفعل من الجسامة بمعنى الضخامة وعظم المقدار يقال جسم الشيء. So all this he mentioned in the Arabic language. In the Arabic language, when you use the word jism, what does it mean? Because part of the meaning of the Arabic language is something that is big. When we say something jism, you say ay a'zam. يقال جسم الشيء أي أعظم فهو جسيم وجسام جسام بالضم. So someone who is big, we call in Arabic language, we say this is jasim, or this is a person who is jusam. والكلام في الجسم الذي هو اسم لا صفة. So it is any part of the nouns, and basically in the Arabic language, when you say something that is jism, it is something that consists of parts. So this is basically some explanations on the Arabic language. And before we go on to Jawhar, inshallah ta'ala, we stop here, and next week inshallah we will continue. I will touch on this again as a revision as usual in the beginning of the class, and then after that inshallah next week we will go on to speak on Jawhar and some of the evidences and explanations on it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with tawfiq. And there is a possibility inshallah, I think most probably next week we will go back into the masjid. We will have our class in the masjid. I will confirm again in the WhatsApp group. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fi dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.